I'll be doing kind of the ground rules as to the way we're going to run this. As I have these three wonderful women, I decided it was best that I take a step back, since I probably know less than they do in this particular subject. We have, as you've already heard, Judy, Sally, Diane. Each will speak for about 10 minutes. We are covering a lot of the world here. We have Judy from Canada, Sally from Australia, Diane from the United States, and that covers all 4 hemispheres in 3 different countries, and we approach things from each country in a different way, so you're going to get an idea as to the sorts of things to direct your attention towards as your children become adults. You have to think differently once they become adults. It's not like when they're in school. It's considerably different. And we have 3 totally different approaches here. And the approach that Judy and I have is a really nascent approach. We're just starting to head into a direction that we want to go. But we've been planning this since our daughter was at least probably 10, is when we really started to think, where do we want her to be when she's an adult? Now she's 24. We're nowhere close to where we want to be, and we're still struggling, and Judy will tell you all about that. Sally is way advanced and is actually working on legislation, organizing change. Diane has another approach altogether. Now, in looking at what we do with adults, in thinking about where you want to be, I'm always reminded when we look at our group of something Robert F. Kennedy said, which is really a paraphrasing of George Bernard Shaw. And he said, there are those who look at things that are and ask why. I dream of things that never were and ask why not. And as your children become adults, that is the approach you have to take, because there's going to be all sorts of people that you will run into who will say, that's not realistic. Well, what is realistic? And you have to decide for yourself, what is realistic for your child? Nobody else can tell you that. You must do that. You must organize that. Now, what we're doing here is another little George Bernard Shaw thing. If I give you an apple, and you give me an apple back, we each have an apple. But if I give you an idea, and you give me an idea back, we each have 2 ideas. And so that's what we're trying to do here. So first up is Diane.
Thanks, Rory. Like Rory said, my approach is so difficult, impossible to put 24 years into 10 minutes. So what I thought I would do for you today is just give you a snapshot into my daughter, Courtney, who you see here, her life. And my theme is vision to reality. Because as I think back through our life, I think that one of the things that early on I learned that became very important in our planning and our implementation was that I learned the importance of vision and actually committing that vision to media. And I'll show you a couple of different ways along the way that I've created visions and then reworked them, probably about every 3 to 5 years. And so let me tell you a little bit about her program, which I call, you see on one, Life Enterprises. The LI stands for little, the F represents flower, which was my nickname for my little flower when she was very young. And Enterprises represents the types of activities that we strive to provide for her to create during her day and during her life. I call it, self-directed adult living model. And just to introduce you, this is my family. We're from the Boston area, and my husband Mike is home. He had a work commitment, so he's not here with us. I love this picture of us. This was taken at the conference 2 years ago, and it's one of probably 3 of us, with all 5 of us in one frame. And professional photography, but you can even see if you take a look at Courtney, she's in motion, right? So even the professional cameras can't catch her standing still. So we always knew that movement was important to her and that she needed that and that needed to be part of her life. So as we struggled through vocational programs that sort of set the bar low and said, we're talking about piecework or sorting or that type of work, we always knew that was not the box she would fit into. As a matter of fact, she doesn't fit in any box. She's always on the move. All of us have a story. All of us, have taken a different path. But Courtney was diagnosed at about age 4, and it took me a long time to get a diagnosis for her. She was pretty typical up until 2 years old. Had an unexplained regression at about age 8, and she lost all skills. She lost language. All of her skills disintegrated. And if we had a diagnosis of autism. And so at that time, I was in this whirlwind of trying to find out why. We live in the Boston area, and we have great schools, we have great hospitals. I knocked on every door trying to find an explanation, and was not able to. It was right about at that time that she was 8 years old, and I had felt like I had exhausted my resources. Was the moment when I realized that there may not be anybody on the face of the earth who was going to be able to help us with this. And so that was the moment that I was talking to Judy earlier. It was the moment that I just said I need to face this reality. And even though I was fearful of it, I was afraid that if I faced it, if I really looked at what was going on, that I would become so sad that I wouldn't be able to come back. And I don't know, I hate crying. But I do remember exactly the day that I decided, this is it. I just need to face this. I need to realize that there's no help. We're going to have to find our way out of this. And I cried to the depths of my soul. And Courtney was in bed. I remember Matt was in the top bunk. She's in the bottom bunk. And I clearly remember just letting it go. And then all of a sudden, this peace came over me. And before that, what I felt myself saying was, we're all alone. And that was the feeling, and I don't know, you may have felt that too along your path, is we're all alone, and that's what was coming out. And I said, baby, we're all alone. And somehow this peace came over me, and I said, well, we better get going. And the next day, my job changed. Instead of trying to determine what this was that was going on, I needed to figure out who I needed to bring into our life to create the type of life for her and for my whole family that I felt we all deserved. And so making that change at that time was a very important and pivotal point. And I have, she has a very small deletion and has, some medical issues that I've listed here that I'm sure all of you deal with as well. Vision. This was my very first vision that I wrote, and I committed it to paper. One of the things that I did after I came to that realization, well, there might not be anyone who can help, but what do I need to know, and what do I need to do to get moving? I went to a seminar, and everybody needed to write a vision. So this was the vision that I actually wrote. She was about 8, and it talks about her having, a meaningful communication system, her wants, her needs, that she'll have a life that includes the community, and so it sounds very nice. And only because you're fellow PMS families am I going to go to the next slide and show you my reality. And this is what we were living with. Is it familiar at all? I know what most of those things are, but I don't know to go through them. But this was reality. But here's the point. It doesn't matter, right? This is day to day, and if your children are older, you've probably been through a lot of this, and it doesn't ever go away, but it becomes less. So what I thought is, okay, we need to make physical changes to the environment so that she has everything that she needs in a certain place in our home. So we took a room downstairs, and I said, okay, let's make all of these important things that she was learning. Oh no, she was learning, I got the 5-minute mark, I'm sorry, I'm trying to flip through these. So we changed the environment, we gave her a place to learn at home. She had a classroom program, she learned at home, and she learned in the community. So what I talked to the school about is that the world is her school. She's not limited just to a classroom. Another vision that I created, I have that we're using now. This is actually a picture of her business card, introductory card. And I use that to communicate. She can communicate with people in the community. I can communicate with staff. We can present it to people as she's out and about in the community. And it tells what her life is about. Her position is community ambassador because she is my life's greatest teacher and also in the community a great teacher. And we started to focus on her day, recreation, and residence, where she's going to live. So she does think she has choices during the day. We have products. The cookies down here, we call them giddy-ups because we thought that was funny because horses like them and people like them too. She shops. If people need it, there's dogs in the neighborhood who need walking. She does shredding. And we created a product called Shred Bedding because we thought that was funny, and we bring it to the critters down at the shelter. So that's her day. This is her actually with her teacher in the kitchen learning how to do cooking. This is our vision for 2015. Here she's doing egg delivery. Recreation, I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but you see that she's out and about and has lots of opportunity to be doing things that she loves. She loves the horseback riding, she loves music. This is a group activity that we set up for young women in the area. We had a little bit of grant money. If any of you have not tried Surfers Healing, do you know Izzy? That's Izzy Paskowitz. She's the only one, Courtney's the only one in our family who has surfed programs. This was a photo that I found online, so another way that you can have a vision is you can find something you can and refer back to it. It was a photo that I looked at and I said, you know what, that looks like somewhere Courtney would like to live. Wasn't quite sure whether it would be out of our house, whether it would be in our house, how it would happen, but I kept that for a long time and I referred back to it. And what we have today in process is this is reality. So what we did was we took that classroom that you saw earlier and now we've made it into an adult living situation for her. We expanded it, we got it our garage, and now I'm going to finish this area, make it like a little cocoon because she likes a little small sleeping area, but you can see she has a kitchen designed for her. She's learning all of the skills. She can use a microwave with, with help. Peace. This just shows the type of technology. When I first thought of it, I called it a SmartMint, and I said there must be technology available that's going to make her life easier. And at the time, a lot of it didn't exist, but there is a lot that's out there now that we can use for our children that will help to bring them independence and support in their adult living. And if you have any questions about anything, you can ask during questions. So, in summary, the vision is important. In whatever way, commit it to something. Commit it to writing, commit it to a notebook. It's a picture, it's something. Know where you want to go. And then in planning, one of the most important things is building strategic alliances with those people who will be funding your program. And I have other slides on that, so later on if you have questions on where the funding came from to do some of this, I'm prepared to show you more, but we'll hold that for questions. And then in the implementation, I can't say enough about staff and choosing the correct staff. One of the things that I learned is I hire horsemen and athletes because that's the pace that Courtney runs at. And they are the people who seem to be the best at nonverbal communication. And when I hire someone, I say, I am hiring you, I do the screening, she does the hiring. So if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. She's very clear in what types of supports and what types of people are going to help her to be as independent as possible. And that's worked out well. And we have just some of the most wonderful staff that I can't say enough about in her life. And the other thing, in the implementation, I would say give yourself a break. You don't really know where or how you're going to get there. So do your best, keep moving forward, and keep your mind open, keep your heart open, and say, it may not turn out exactly the way you think, but if you have that vision and you have that picture, you will eventually get closer. It'll help you make decisions to get you to where you want to go. So, and this is just our philosophy. There she is at one of her favorite places at Great Brook Farm. She loves to be out and walking around animals, out in the fresh air. And fundamentally, what we wanted for her is that just life. And we struggled with when we set it up. I said, we were presented with options off the shelf, and we said, no, how does a person with complex disability just live? She doesn't have to go somewhere. She doesn't have to fit in somewhere. How can we create a life where she can just live? And I think in many ways we've done it. We're not done. but I think that she's pretty happy at this point. And we have some ideas for what we want to do in the future, but if you want to, you can ask.
Thank you,
I'm out of time. All right, thank you.
Following this, of course, we are going to have questions from the floor and all that sort of thing, which I'll try and organize. But we thought about 10 minutes to start, just to give a flavor as to what each of us are doing, and then from there you can decide what you're going to do. But keep an open mind. Okay, Sally.
No,
Well,
don't start timing yet.
I'm not timing you.
No, I can't find the book.
I'll reset.
Okay, and what do I push? Good afternoon, everybody. I just start off by saying three things. I'm Sally Richards from Australia. You will look at the things that I've done and probably the other mums have done, and you might think that either it's been easy or it's been not a very long time to achieve it, or that we've been lucky. And I can tell you that it's been none of those things. I had 4 sons in 6 years, and Jackson is my 3rd son. He's now 28. My husband had bipolar 2 disorder. He committed suicide 5 years ago. Now, I'm only telling you that because, like you, I'm sure like all of you, life has been tough, and for many of you it probably continues to be very tough. I cried an ocean of tears, and I've been despairing many times in my life. The second thing I'd like to say is that having Jackson in many ways is one of the best things that ever happened to me. It's made me a far better person, and I've met some fabulous people along the way, people like I've met here at this conference. And the third thing is that people will tell you that you are unrealistic, that the things you dream of are never going to happen, that you're dreaming, and people will stomp on your dreams. And you mustn't let them. You just have to, I mean, people told me that all the time for years, you know, you're nuts, that isn't going to work. Anyway, so there's my son Jackson with Philly, there's his website. On the website there are, there's videos and there's all sorts of information on the website. So Jackson works in a business called Jackmail. This is just some ideas about planning. Planning takes a long time, and we all make mistakes, and you won't get it right the first time, and maybe not the second or the third. But, you know, with work and time, you will get it right eventually. So I wanted a good life for Jackson. I didn't see why Jackson should have a life any different fundamentally than the lives of my other 3 sons. And these are just some of the things that I see as being part of a good life. I really like this. It's not the unexamined life that is not worth living, but the unimagined one. We tend to think small. We don't imagine big enough. So my son Jackson needs 24-hour support. He's cognitively, profoundly, intellectually disabled. He cannot do anything for himself. My son Tim said to me, Jackson would die of thirst standing in front of the sink. So in 28 years he hasn't learned how to get water from the tap into a cup. But he works every weekday morning from 8:30 till midday. The business is in its 8th year of operation. That's what we do. And this is why I planned a courier service for Jackson. Those are his skills and abilities and his needs. Oh, you've got these slides anyway, I think, in the book. So this is the key. Jackmail is a professional, reliable, punctual, ethical and highly organised business. We haven't missed a single delivery. When my husband died, when Jackson spent 3 months in hospital, it doesn't matter what happens, the mail gets delivered. We are not a charity. We deliver the service we say we will deliver. Jackson doesn't always go, of course, because he's in hospital for 3 months. Or he might be unwell, but the mail gets delivered, come hell or high water.
This is in the book too, but there was a lot of steps involved in setting up the small business. This is specific to Australia, of course. It's very important what Diane said about setting up partnerships. You need your allies, you need partners, you need support. I would never have achieved any of these things without some support from wonderful people and organisations. Convincing people. Whenever you have a dream, you need to convince people. So when I first started the business, I supported Jackson for about 6 weeks. And Jackson was a very difficult young man when he was younger. He's calmed down a lot as he's got older. And I would be supporting him to deliver the mail, and I'd have one little voice on my shoulder saying, "You are nuts. This is never going to work. What are you thinking?" And then the other voice would say, "No, keep going. It might work, and what choice do you have? You could sit at home and cry. Oh, well, let's just deliver the mail." So I was a bit like a mad person. So this is what Jackson has. He's got a legitimate presence in the ACT business community. It is a respected business. Jackson is known, he is greeted. He's very well known. He drives around in his little red car. There's been every benefit for him, for the businesses, for the community. There's not a single loser in this venture. And also that business buys Jackson 25 hours of support a week because it brings in an income. So I heard the guy talking in the planning session saying that support staff here might be paid $9 an hour. I pay my driver $28 an hour because I can and because he's gold and I want to keep him. The other thing I've done is where Jackson lives now, he moved out a year ago and he moved into what I call an intentional community. Now I can't tell you too much about it in 5 minutes, but there's a book here if you want. It's very comprehensive. I wrote it with my son Tim. It costs $10. That's just, I don't make any money, so I'm not benefiting financially. So it's called the Phelan-McDermid Intentional Community, and it took me 11 years to make this happen. So I started when Jackson was 16. He moved in when he was 27. There are 25, I was modelled on Rougemont Intentional Community in Pickering, Canada. So this is what I call, I got it from their book actually, this is what I mean by an intentional community. When I was looking for somewhere for Jackson to live, when I was planning, in Canberra there was an organisation called the Canberra Housing Cooperative, or Co-Housing. I went to many meetings. They knew about Jackson. I said, I think it might be a nice place for him to live. And they said, yes, 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 until one meeting, a woman there said, "Oh, we don't know if Jackson's going to be allowed to live in our housing cooperative." And I said, "Well, why not?" And she said, "Well, we don't know if we want any disabled people living there." And I thought, wow. What I thought in good Aussie language is up yours. And I left and I never went back. But we have been told this by other suburbs in Canberra. We don't want people with a disability living in our suburb. They still in many places see them as menaces. Okay, I've got 2 minutes. So Jackson and 2 other young men, they have their own individual houses. They do not live in a group house. They were there first, and I decided to turn it around. Instead of people saying, "We don't want your son to live with us," I thought, well, I'm going to decide who lives with my son. That's why it took me 11 years. So other ordinary housing residents had to apply to live in the community with Jackson and Ben and Dan. They got their houses first. We worked with architects. The other residents were selected through a panel. Jackson and Ben, they're fully supported. They're all fully supported by a combination of co-residents. This is another new model. It's in the book. It's not paid by the hour support. So that's Jackson's house on the end. So basically, what Jackson has is a life in community and of community, both where he lives and in his work and for his recreation. He spends all of his life with people who speak to him like I'm speaking to you now. He is well respected, he's treated with dignity. We also choose his support staff and take note of whether he does or does not like them. That was the opening. See, hundreds of people. It was a day of such joy and achievement when we had the official opening. There were hundreds of people there and it was really just the most fabulous day. Oh. That's all the people in the community. How do you utilise that? That's the Blues Brothers.
Thank you, Sally. And just while I have a moment, we should welcome our people that are viewing this on live feed. We don't know where you are, but welcome. Hey, Judy.
Hi there, I'm Judy from Ontario, and this is Kristen sitting on top of my good friend Cindy. And what I'm going to talk about today is where we're at right now is kind of a continuum of how we've started and how our life to date has been. There aren't any answers. In Ontario, we live in the land of waiting list. And yes, you qualify, but there's no funding. So when Kristen was young, she's the youngest of 3 kids. Her older sister's 32, her brother's 29, and Kristen's going to be 25 in November. When she was first diagnosed, we literally just went to McMaster and looked up the paper encyclopedia trying to figure out how to get her diagnosed, and literally gave the doctors the list of things. Check this out, check this out. And finally, we believe very much that good things come when you simply believe and you simply keep on plugging and you refuse to stop. There's no choice. You keep putting one foot in front of another. When she was in school, I guess when she was about 4 1/2, we finally got her diagnosed. Up until that point, they wouldn't give us any therapy or anything. We were assessed to death, and we always played the game. If we went through the assessment, maybe we would be rewarded with therapy for Kristen. They kept wanting to give me stress counseling, and I said, well, no, don't tell her daughter. So in Ontario, we received support for schools, and she did qualify for one-on-one funding, but the Education Act says the principal can do whatever they want. They split it around the school. The year we finally went to Human Rights was when her one-on-one time was getting her diapers changed, and that changed a little bit after. When she got into high school, they suggested that since we live in a neighborhood where there is a special needs class, just down the street in the high school, she should go there. Well, Kristen is very, very typically PMS in terms of speaking, behavior, happiness, but a very defined personality. Well, a flight risk for sure. This was a school on a very busy thoroughfare, and it was also a woodworking class, like saws and nails and glue and all the things you can eat and really are pretty, definitely not what we want for our kids. So we learned a long time ago to take a look at the process and build our life on our philosophy. We decided very early on to look very clearly that we are a family, we want to have fun, we want to have inclusion. Kristen is a very important part of our life and of our community. She belongs with us, but that doesn't mean that that's where it will be in the future. When she finished school, we had a great big long list of nothing. We have, of course, our IEPs. We have transitional planning. Our transition plan is legislated, you have to have it. Well, it was really kind of a farce, just simply because you're transitioning to the black hole of nothing. There really isn't anything after high school. We didn't want to see her in a situation where she was not included in the community. So all the way along, we found people who really did love her. We were very, very lucky that we lived near a university and had an awful lot of people who came into our life and really valued her and treasured her. When we looked at a plan for when she graduated, we wanted very much to look at her strengths and also to accept some of the things that are really not likely to ever happen. We looked at some of the people being into a sheltered workshop where things were incredibly boring, and it just was not for Kristen. She needs movement, she needs activity, she needs to be with people, she needs to be included. And so we based that, our whole plan, on what does she need, what works for her, what helps her build her strength, and what gets her involved in developed friendships. When we started looking at it, again, we had absolutely nothing and we didn't believe it. The first year after graduation, we were self-funding. All the way along, we didn't get diaper subsidies. Fortunately, when she turned 18, she did. We applied for our Ontario Disability Savings Program right away, which helped us with a little bit to help us with some of our daycare expenses. But it became very imperative. We wanted a life and a future for Kristen. There was no way that we could self-fund it, and that we had to try and figure out how to go about doing that. So the philosophy we looked at is know your legislation. We all come from very diverse backgrounds. Does that mean I have 5 more minutes? Okay. We come from diverse backgrounds. Rory and I really communicate well. And we felt that legislation is something that you really want to know. You want to build your relationships. So I went about building networks and relationships with people, only to discover all of a sudden everybody I developed a network with decided to retire. I thought that was really pretty bad, and they should have been there for me. So we started developing other friendships. So when you're looking at your networks, really expand it as far as you can. Find people who really enjoy your child, who look at life, who really understand social inclusion. In Ontario, we're moving very much towards the self-directed model. And in order to receive funding, you go through this process called SIS, Supports Intensity Scale. We got that idea from the United States. And if in fact it does affect you, I would recommend very clearly to download it from the internet, find out what it says, find out all the things, because it's a 5-hour interview. You go through 57 different life skills and activities, and you just simply can't answer those questions without thinking about it ahead of time. I know folks who went through it, they answered everything, and they received a very paltry subsidy just simply because they hadn't thought intentionally about what they were doing. We received a good subsidy, however, there was no funding. Well, at that point, they had just spent a couple of $1 million on building their infrastructure, and I was pretty darn offended that they could spend all this money on bureaucracy and not give anything to the community. So we started on the letter writing, the telephoning. We went from local to regional to provincial, and we finally did get some funding. We're about 15%. 85% are still on the waiting list, hoping. We're hoping that that will be resolved, and that's where we're spending our time and attention. What we want in the future simply doesn't exist in Ontario right now. As Sally says, Rougemont is probably the closest thing. But with Kristen needing 24/7 care, it doesn't provide necessarily everything we need. We look at our future and we know that our children, although they'll always be part of Kristen's life, cannot provide caregiving. She would be incredibly lonely to live in a supported independence situation. So we do want to have an intentional community. We don't want a group home, which could be an institution within itself, because you may or may not get out without the gang. We'd like Kristen to have a house with friends and activities. Our schedule is very much involved with what's good. We're looking that we don't want her to have lymphedema, so we look at exercise. She walks every day, she swims, she's involved in bowling, activities, and also in art program. She's actually sold 6 paintings and 4 to strangers, so we know she's got something going on. We'd like to build that as more of an enterprise. And again, it's still a work in progress. We're looking at some type of housing situation, but right now, we could go out and buy a house for Kristen, and if we need 1 penny of government support, they will make the decision who lives there, and it may or may not be Kristen. So we have our situation very well laid out in front of us. And the one thing we do discover that's a lot of fun is that we never ever get bored. We've always got something to do every single day. Kristen's a big part of our life, and we have her with us all of the time. We have an amazing quality of life for her right now, and we want to keep it that way, even when we're not here anymore. So, we're going to open it up for, I have 1 more minute. So now we do have some respite service. You know, once she became an adult, we had received respite service both as an adult service and as a child support. So we had quite a number of days per year. And we thought, okay, we're doing okay here. Once she graduates, we're for sure going to be able to keep this and maybe add to it. Well, that didn't happen. We went from 39 days a year down to 16 days a year. We went, huh? Like, what's that? So we've had lots of opportunities to challenge the system. And what we do know is that the more you have this opportunity, the better you get at negotiating, at developing your skills, and initiating results. And we're still working on that, so maybe in a couple of years we can tell you we were a bit more successful than we have been so far. But so far we're doing pretty good.
Well, I just learned something. I just learned that when you're timing a speaker for 10 minutes, 10 minutes goes very, very quickly because you're kind of worried for them, like are they going to get all their points in? But when that speaker happens to be your wife, it takes an eternity. Now, we're going to open the floor for questions to either individual panelists and panelists, like if you want to piggyback off each other, you're basically running the show from now on. I'll just run around with a microphone, make sure everybody can be heard. And one thing that we have with our daughters, we learned long ago, is that we're getting on. And as you get older and they become more grown up, you start worrying, not worrying, but you become concerned. Like, they're going to outlive you for sure. We're positive of that. So you have planning, like Rick Wood talked about, how to plan your money and all that sort of stuff. But the thing is that you have to have fun. You have to build fun. You have to look at everything as if it is fun. And you have to remember that you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing. Now, questions. They can be succinct, direct, right on something, or they can be speculative, and what do you think sorts of things in a way that we go from there. Did we get that one? I got this one.
Well, they don't have a microphone.
Oh.
No, he has 2 mics, right? Yeah.
No, but they won't have a mic to
No,
answer
they need
up
a
front.
microphone.
They need a microphone.
Okay, first, I just want to say to the 4 of you, you're so inspirational because a lot of times we hear a lot of tough stuff, but you guys are fantastic. And I'm so excited that, maybe Sam's 20 and, now I can really start thinking, really he can do some things. So thank you very much. So, but I do have a question, like some of you've heard about microboards, like what about not just us as parents doing the planning and the taking care of all the finances and stuff, not just us, the microboard thing, what do you guys think about that kind of thing?
So we have looked at that, and we've attended so many workshops. Rory and I had an opportunity for the last 3 years or so to be involved in a provincial organization, and we were looking at circles of support and microboards and the whole bit.
Julie, maybe you could explain what a microboard or circle of support would look like?
Well, you have your circle of support, and you have a number of people who are engaged and interested in your child and are very involved in helping to plan their future and so forth. I guess probably we've come away feeling like major losers because we keep looking at the people in our life, and they're like, okay, you're supposed to get together once a month and do this and do that and do the next thing. And all I can see is this load of work of having a party at your house every month and inspiring people to help your children, and they're all going, huh? So we know that that's something that we want to do, and yes, we have a lot of friends, we have a lot of family friends, we have a lot of people interested in Kristen, but we don't really have anybody in our life that ever wants to give us real physical support. When she was young, my sisters would take her out. We had lots of that happening, but what we have found that as she gets older and her needs are more defined and she's in diapers, more and more we have a lot of people going, well, we really love her. We really, have fun with her every time, but we couldn't manage her by herself. What if she runs away? Because that's a real issue. I mean, when we're in the grocery store and I'm at the self-cash checkout, I put my foot on top of her so she doesn't take off. She did this in the National History Museum in Washington. That was an interesting time. So we found, like, what will we do? And we had a number of questions that we weren't able to have people answer. And yes, we do want something like that. But in fact, if you have your circle, what happens when they get old? What happens when they want to pass on the baton? And we're saying, gee whiz, we want something that's a legal entity that is secure, that doesn't depend upon people knowing us or knowing her, that is sustainable in the long term. The vehicle that we're looking at really doesn't exist right now, and this is what we're trying to do, is define very clearly what it should be like, where it should be, because we'd like Kristen to live with 2 or 3 people who are perhaps a little bit more skilled than her, that have similar interests and can push her along. The respite she receives right now, the home she's in, she likes it when she goes there for a weekend. But the other 3 residents are a 25-year-old fella, and the other 2 fellas are maybe 40 to 65, both in wheelchairs, and all of them nonverbal. And we're going, this would not be what we want. We know what we don't want. But the microboards are something a lot of people are considering, and we just simply haven't had a chance. We just can't figure out how to make it successful 20 years downstream. We might do it right now when we're alive. We might get people committed for the 5 years or so after we, kick the bucket. But I don't know how to sustain that or have them recruit and so forth, because it's all such a small thing. So.
All right, eternity's coming.
Hi, I'll just say a little bit more about Circle. Jackson's had circles of support, and I've been involved in setting up circles of support for many families in Canberra. They can work and they can be wonderful. This is the most common comment is, I don't want to have to organise a circle of support at my house every month. And the thing is, you don't have to. There are ways and means of doing it, and a very common way now is that you have a facilitator, and in Canberra, where I come from, there's small amounts of money for you to employ a facilitator. They do the asking for you, they do the organising, and they can have the circle of support at their house instead of yours. The whole thing about microboards is that it's incorporated, it's like a circle of support that's incorporated. So you have a constitution, you have a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. And so because it's an incorporated body, you have to fill those positions on the board. It's a microboard because it's a board formed around one individual. So you have to keep those positions filled, so there is some certainty that it may continue when you are no longer the driving force, because this is the thing that worries all of us. Who will do it when I'm no longer here? I've been looking at microboards for quite a long time now, and I'm not sure if Jackson needs one or not. He's got his community, and the thing is, what he's got and what all of our sons and daughters need is layers of safeguarding. It's not good enough to have just one kind of safeguarding. So you might have a microboard, you might have immediate family, you might have friends and relations, you might have some organisations. Jackson's safeguarded by, I have a fabulous organisation that's like an umbrella. It gives me autonomy to employ staff and to basically train staff, recruit staff and run things. But what it takes care of is the legal and financial and employment administration stuff. But that's a safeguard for Jackson, and I mean, I don't know whether a microboard in his case is going to be just overkill, but it's just something that I haven't quite worked out. There's a lot of information about it on the internet, and it comes out of Canada. So yeah, that's all I've got to say about microboards. Is that enough, Sue?
That's pretty good.
Okay, next question? Oh, we have one. Oh, wait, I'll get you at next. Rick's right up here, I don't have to go as far. Legs aren't as good.
Thank you. There's some gaps in my understanding of this. So I want to focus on, Rory said, we're getting on. I can see that, Rory. But, well, you said it. And I'm still blonde, right? So while you are alive, even though you're getting on, I'm very unclear as to what your expectations are. Are you suggesting that Kristen is going to stay with you as long as you or she can, and during that period of time you're going to think about what's next, and then when that comes, assuming that you're still around but incapable of caring for her for whatever reason, my question is, what role do you envision her siblings playing? And then the second question is similar to the first, but that would be after you pass on. I mean, I can envision a structure and I can envision a circle of support. In our instance, because ours is 18 and still in school, the circle of support largely is around those who are involved in his life, which is related to school. Not entirely, but largely. And so in 3 or 4 years, when he's no longer in school, I would expect it to be a different circle. But in the end, you've got to figure out not just where he will live, but who's going to care for him, how are you going to fund it, and then in the end, what's going to happen when you're no longer there to actually make those decisions. I know my question is getting longer. I can assume that if you leave an estate, you can fund his life with that estate. But otherwise, is it self-funded during life? I'd like you to explain a little more, because I think that's really what's on all of our minds, and I don't know if anybody's actually figured it out, although I'm sure there's some parents here with older kids. I know that there are. Are you getting what I'm sort of thinking out loud about?
Yeah, and I guess probably, Rick, right now, we're looking at Kristen's life over the last 4 years, and we're starting to think about this as being kind of a golden period for her. She received one-on-one funding and needed support during school and really never got it. She's never really received speech therapy or physiotherapy or virtually any kind of therapy. When she was younger, we were finally able to wiggle our way through and get about 6 to 10 hours a week of support at home. We've always hired our own workers. We could have a choice of going to an agency and having the agency provide workers at $30 an hour. We wanted to go to Europe. We finally figured out, we went to France this year, but we started last year. And after about 10 weeks of trying to find support, we finally gave it up because all of a sudden we're going to an agency and discovering it'll be $700 for a 24-hour period. Not going to happen. So we are now looking at our future and how to do it, but you're absolutely right. The funding is essential. Rick just did the workshop on planning and estate planning. In Canada, we have something that's called a Henson Trust, and that's like your special needs trust. It's an arm's length trust that you put your funding into and your money, so she will have funding at that point. Up until then, and so now, the first year we did find that we financed it 100% by ourselves. We played all the games and we talked to people, and finally we're able to nudge things open. Now, I have a little bit of a problem with this because you see, Rory and I do consulting, so we're very used to writing proposals and negotiating and smoothing things around. And where I had trouble with that is that we were able to secure funding, and 15% of the people can, 85% can't. And I simply believe in social justice, and I find it absolutely abysmal if perhaps all you have is high school or English isn't your first language, chances are you're not going to get help. And I just find that, you know what, we can't sit still and accept that. So we have a program lined up for Kristen, you know, the horseback riding and the whole bit. We've arranged it all. Our primary support are people that we've found and we hired. Our primary caregiver we found from on the internet, from a stray person who knew somebody else who put us in touch, and she turned out to be just what we needed. But we're a heartbeat away from disaster. It could happen any day. So now we're looking at what's our next step, how do we get a house, how do we acquire it. Rougemont is a model that we're looking at. But you're right, Rick, without funding, it just doesn't work. We do our funding all self-directed. You can get agencies, you have to pay a 10% administration fee, so we do our own payroll, we find our own people, and so forth. Does that give you a little bit of a start? There's no answer for how do we get our house. We have to change things. We also have what we call a registered disability savings plan, where you can acquire about $5,000 a year. You can put $1,500 in, and you get a government bond, put $5,000, up to $5,000. It adds up very quickly, but getting the money out at the other end is also prescriptive, but we felt we'd rather take the chance and the idea it would open up.
So I agree, there's no single answer. I think there are probably a number of answers, and they're specific and individualized. So let me ask this. What role do you think that her siblings will play after you pass on? Have you thought about that? And specifically, have you, I mean, I'm sure you have, because you guys are thinkers. What specifically, what have you thought about the burden, if you will, either financial or otherwise, on the responsibility-wise, on those siblings in the event that you expect them to be involved?
Well, I'll answer that. We always have kept Kristen's brother and sister involved in her life, of course, as a brother and sister, but not a caregiving situation or any responsibility like that. They had to be free. We wanted them to be totally free to live their life, and that's the way it's got to be. It's just like when we went for a guardianship. We had an opportunity of going to a lawyer, such as you, and spending about $15,000 in a year and a half through the court system to get guardianship. Or we could just trust in the Lord, so to speak, and give Kristen up to the public guardian and trust, and then apply to be her guardian, which is what we did, and it ended up costing $250 for an assessment, and then $500 for the paperwork with them, and we got the guardianship, and we're all done. And so we chose that route, and when we come down to the end, it may be that she is assigned to the public guardian and trust, because the way it is now in Ontario, and most of Canada I suspect, is that the government will not support you unless you're at the top of the list. And we, because we've always worked and we have a house and a car and things like that, we will never be at the top of the list. And that's the unfortunate truth about it. And just to very briefly say, when we talk about the circle of support and that sort of thing, we were part of a group that was chosen by our Association of Community Living, which is a service organization, and to teach us about circle of support and that sort of thing. And we got to go 4 times a year, 3 years, up to a nice little YMCA leadership resort camp, and with these other people from across Ontario. And we started off at the first meeting kind of pushing, like, why are we here? Why are we here? Well, we're here to meet people and talk and things like that. And the second time we went, well, why are we here? Why are we here? Well, we eventually found that they got some money from the federal government to pull people together, to train them in this, and the whole thing was just a mess. It didn't go anywhere. We have Facebook names and stuff. We communicate, somewhat with some of those people we were with, but the whole thing disappeared. All that money, like we're talking quite a bit of money. What were we, 20 families? 20 families all brought together for these wonderful weekends with food, and it was incredible. And it was just all these service workers, planning leadership and all that sort of stuff. And that's where our money goes, unfortunately. Ladies, would you like to piggyback?
I just wanted to address that question. I think what you've brought up is what every parent thinks of forever. Who's going to look after my child when I'm gone? Who's going to do that? Who's going to keep them safe? And that's our greatest fear. I mean, our sons and daughters have all got siblings. My siblings don't live in the same city as Jackson. They're not there. So I don't have any family. So the only thing I could advise you is that whatever you do, wherever you live, has got to be really strategic. So you work out where you want to be, and you start with the end. You want is it daughter? Son? So what is it that you want? So basically it's about safeguarding his life, whatever that life looks like. And then you have to work backwards. And I mean, it takes an incredibly long time and a lot of thinking. It does take funding, it takes partnerships. And I mean, there's no guarantees for any of us that our kids are going to be okay. But all we can do is put in place the best mechanisms that we can, whatever they are, and just, work while we're alive to do that. And I mean, we've still, all of us, I should think, got a few more decades to kind of keep things going. But, it's always about relationships and people. More than anything, it's about having the people in your sons and daughters' lives that will look out for them. So, I mean, that's kind of all I can say about that. It's not easy, but everybody's got to do it individually, because governments won't do it.
Can I ask where you're from? Who asked the question?
Where California.
California?
Yes. Losing his hearing.
Well, I imagine, different, there are different federal and state funding resources that I think that at any time your child can't be too young for you to educate yourself on them. I think one of the things that I did that I suggest is that early on I said, okay, she's going to be in school for 12 years and that's an entitlement in the United States. After that, for a lot of years, she'll be supported, hopefully, by some other funding. So very early on, I volunteered for positions in my Department of Developmental Services, which is my local state agency that I knew would be the one who would care for her as an adult. And by doing so, I became knowledgeable about who's who, how the funding works, and it helped them to be aware of her needs and that she was coming down the road, so that it wasn't a surprise. I didn't wait until after transition planning and have a few months to decide and pick something off the shelf. They knew we were coming, they knew that we were going to do something, and they were very supportive actually of doing something creative. This is just I thought something like this question might come up, and I just quickly put something together that I think that at any time in your child's life you should become aware of. You know, that there are federal programs that will support them as an adult, SSI, Section 8 housing. I don't know if you know about that, but it's administered differently in each state. So mine is very specific to Massachusetts, but I have seen across states that there are, the Health and Human Services agencies, and they're implemented very differently, but they all tie back into that federal legislation. So learn about SSI Section 8. Within your state, you may have a health, we have Mass Health, that she qualifies on her own income as an adult. So it doesn't matter what my husband and I, what our income is. She's treated as an adult at age, it's either 18 or 19. And so that's available to her. Section 8 housing, there's a, 10-year waiting list. And she's on that list. She was on that list the day she turned 18. And that's a source of funding that at some point, if she stays in the apartment in our house, she could pay us rent through Section 8 once that voucher is available. There's two different ways you can get Section 8. You can have a project housing, or you can have a voucher that travels with the person and they can choose where they live. So no reason why, I'm not sure across states how it's implemented, but that's something that you should become familiar with and see if it's available to you and sign up as soon as possible and get on that waiting list. For my daughter, the Department of Developmental Services, I think that what you'll find, I've seen a change in the tide, even as I have been looking for funding for her from the federal standpoint and the state standpoint, that they are encouraging more self-direction. The way I approached it was I found out how much it would cost for her to be in a day and residential program. And because I was able, on intake, she was declared a priority 1. There's something called MASCAP where they decide need. And so she was on the top of the list for need of funding, and the funding was available, and we were told that we could choose from an agency that administers a day and residential program, or we could opt to have a fiscal intermediary, which is what we opted for. There's a company called Public Partnerships, and they're nationwide, and they do basically the budget goes to them, and they do the administration of the payroll and reimbursements, that type of support. But that's what we do, self-directed, and we use a fiscal intermediary. Am I going to do that forever? I don't think so. But and Courtney was diagnosed at 21, so that's why we are where we are. And I do envision her living in her own place with her, maybe people her own age, or having that circle. But you do what you can do when you do. It's your life. But this is our life. I'm looking out into the future. But what is very important is the day they become an adult, when you negotiate that budget, that's probably the budget they'll have for the rest of their life. So you need to be thinking about that. So what I did was I underbid the agency. I found out how much it would cost DDS to have her in a day residential program. And I wrote a budget and said, here, I'll do it for this much. And they said, okay. And they supplied, hooked me up with a fiscal intermediary, and that's what I do. So I will hire someone to do the things that I'm doing now, but right now I'm doing them. But my plan would be to hire other people and bring people into her support. So.
Question here?
Okay, so that leads beautifully into my question, which is, my daughter's a little bit younger. She's only 7, but we do already have a state waiver for her, which means that I get full-time caregivers during the summer whenever she's out of school. And it's not exactly a perfect fit for her because it was more of a medical model waiver, but it gives us the services we need and the help we need, which was a hallelujah moment when we got it. However, the problem is my question to all of you actually is, even when you have those services, you're placing a tremendous amount of trust in these caregivers and these respite workers that come into your home and take your child out, which she desperately needs. She needs to be integrated into the community. That's our goal for her, to get her out. She loves to do that. And they're background screened by the home health agency. However, just in the last 3 months alone, we've had 2 caregivers take her to undisclosed locations and lie to us about it. These are people that were backgrounds. We did everything right. We went through an agency, they were background screened. So we're looking into literally GPS tracking devices to place on her. I know that isn't a solution for after we do pass. I can't monitor that forever, but as a parent, especially of a young child that's nonverbal, extremely vulnerable, we still don't have an answer to where she was for the first time it happened, 2 hours. The second caregiver brought her to her boyfriend's house. You can imagine what goes through your mind then. So have any of you utilized any systems like this, any safeguards to ensure that your child is safe when they are out with a caregiver or have an experience with this?
Well, I think that's completely unacceptable that somebody took your daughter out and you didn't know where she was. You have to have complete trust in the people who are with your sons and daughters. There's just no other way. You have to trust them 100%. So I don't know if the agency that you work with will allow you to recruit your own support staff. I won't let Jackson go out with someone who turns up at my door that I don't know and he doesn't know. And it happens, people do that. And I say, who are you? I say, oh, I'm so-and-so, I've come from the agency to take your son out. I say, oh, I don't think so. But the thing is, so the first thing is you need to know them and know them pretty well and trust them. Now, I don't employ anybody in Jackson's life who's got a disability certificate. He doesn't have any medical needs, and so to me that's the least important thing. I employ people who have the right attitude and the right philosophy and who respect and treat him, as I would want him to be treated. So that's the first thing. I have a really super high quality of who I will allow, the privilege, I would say, of working with my son. Now, if they don't see it as a privilege, then you don't give them the job. And I think that you either need to talk to the agency or get rid of the agency or allow them to let you support the staff, to employ the staff or recruit the staff yourself, is what I would say.
Alice, would you have something different to offer?
I don't use an agency to do hiring. I do the hiring, I do word of mouth. I've had, similar problems as well. What I do, though, some of the safeguards I put in place when she's going out for the first time with someone, I call a friend and say, she's going to Walmart, can you make sure she's there? Somebody who the person doesn't know. So I've done that before, and I have GPS. But mostly, I trust the people who I hire, and that was very tricky, and that's why, Sue, I do a lot of it myself, and I would like for someone else to do it, but I've tried to go through agencies. I've had I can tell you lots of stories. It didn't work. I think that Courtney hiring her own people and people who work for her is something that's necessary for her to have the quality of life that she needs. What it means, though, sometimes is that I'm the help. I would rather have no help than bad help. And, that cuts into my time, but that's what I'm doing, and in a way I'm settled, but it brings me peace.
I concur with both Diane and Sally on that, and I guess because we've done all our own hiring over the years, I used to think that if somebody had the education and the certification and, approved on paper they could do it, that, oh, hey. But I found out time and again that they weren't necessarily a good fit. So we hire and we look at personality and attitude and ability to communicate with Kristen, and Kristen enjoying them. She's a pretty good judge of character, we've discovered. And sometimes, we hire people like music therapists. We thought, hey, she's got this nailed. She should be a real good one for Kristen. And she turned out to be a real dog. It just didn't work at all. So we help, Kristen helps us hire her helpers and staff. And we know right away from her demeanor, does she have a good time? Does she trust them? And there are some people that she's standoffish about, and we know that that's just not going to work. We start out with them playing in the backyard, going for a short walk, until we really get to know them. and know about their lifestyle and their personal situation. And yeah, it's a real commitment, but you know what? We're guarding a treasure. I mean, it's worth the time it takes.
Just an announcement, if any of you have the sibling trip out there, they're coming back at 5:50. Oh, between 5:15 and 5:30, as the schedule says? Yes.
They're here, I just get a text.
Oh, they're here, Sheriff, oh, aren't we just amazing? Here you go.
Hi there. This question is kind of revolved around the Jack's Mail, is that right? Jack Mail. So it seems like a really intriguing idea. The funding stream is obviously really important. I think there's more opportunity for self-directing based on the presentation she gave, and one of the programs we're learning about in our state may be a program. So there's an opportunity for us to have a chunk of money to initiate or start something like this. How did you start it, and how are you, I guess that would be the most important thing, how you started, and what is really important about keeping it and maintaining it, that business and that setup that you have there?
Okay. I suppose what you're talking about, I call Jack Mail a social enterprise micro business. So you're saying you might have some funding, is that what you're saying, to start something like that? Okay, so generally I would say that whatever, you look at your person and you look at their skills and abilities and their likes and their needs, and whatever it is you decide to do, you build around them. And you've got to be it's like I said before, you've got to be strategic. So I had the idea for Jack Mail, and I didn't know how to do it because I've never run a business in my life. But it took me a year to do all of the thinking and to set it up. And my husband was alive then, so he could help me a little bit. But I talked to a lot of people. So I talked to people who ran small businesses. I spoke to people who had mail delivered. I spoke to lawyers. I spoke to accountants. And I just tried to work out what would be the best thing for Jackson and for me that I could manage. So it's going to be completely individual. And when I started, so I set up the business and I launched the business, and I had no customers, not one. So I had to do a lot of advertising, and I got no customers. And when Jackson finished school and I had to give up work, I had one customer. So I'd go and deliver the mail to one customer. But the hardest thing, once I had the idea and had bought the van, buying the van and the uniforms and the bags was easy. The hard thing was finding some businesses who would contract us to do the deliveries. And I didn't think it would be so hard, but I had to do cold calling, and I had to write articles. I had to do a lot of stuff I wasn't comfortable doing. And gradually, I got more and more customers, and the business has been working at full capacity now, I'd say, for almost the entire time it's been going. It probably took me 3 to 6 months to build up the business. So that's how, I don't know if that's answering your question, but I could talk to you later about specific steps. But the key thing for Jack Mail was it had to generate enough income to help subsidise the cost of the full support that Jackson needed. So that's why the little courier business seemed quite smart, in that you could do a number of deliveries per hour to cover the cost of the support worker. Is that enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
It sounded like you just employed a lot of business, standard business practices.
Yeah, I did. I didn't know I was, but I did. And people said to me, you have to do a business plan. And I thought, man, I don't know about doing a business plan. So I didn't do one. And then other people said, you have to have a plan B in case plan A fails. And then my husband, Max, said, He said, let's not have a plan B, let's just make plan A work. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea, we'll just make plan A work. But I'll tell you a little story. There's a family I know in Canberra. I mentored them for a long time because they wanted to start a little courier business on the north side. And when I finally saw her, you know, a year or so later, and I said, how's Parent Post? And she said, it failed and folded. And I said, what happened? She said, well, we got $5,000 to do a business plan. And we went to an accountant and he did a business plan for us. And the business plan was hopeless. I said, what do you mean it was hopeless? Oh, he had parent delivering mail in the afternoon and she's hopeless in the afternoon. She can only do it in the morning. You had the wrong area. I said, but why did you accept the business plan if it was hopeless? And she said, well, we didn't know. We just paid him the money and so then we tried to do the plan. And I thought, it's like your circles of support thing. What a most appalling waste of money. So, you know, you can do a business plan and have a plan A and a plan B and you can still fail. So it's about doing the deep, deep thinking about your son or daughter and what you think will work and being really strategic.
Do you think you can franchise in New Mexico?
I think it's clear we're all in different jurisdictions, and what we have to deal with is very much the same. It's people and bureaucracy and what they want, and not so much what we want. But what it comes down to is research, and constant research, and trying to figure out if it doesn't work, well, it didn't work, let's just keep on going. It pays a lot. It's better to fail and fail and fail, and then finally when you're successful, feel so good.
I have two comments. One is to the lady with the caregiver. We found that hiring our own and actually using some of the special ed teachers who want to earn extra money on the weekends and night times who know our child work really well. So that would be my suggestion to you. The other is a question for anybody in the United States who have adult children with the Social Security. I know there's a lot with the school wanting me to get involved in the transition, but will my daughter get the Social Security? It goes payable to her, and then did you guys do that where she gets your child gets the checks, but since they're unable to make decisions, I know I have to become her guardian. So if you could touch on that a little bit, but also on has anybody gotten the government to pay them to take care of their adult child rather than put them into a facility? They pay you to have them live at home and you care for them rather than the government paying for them.
I guess the first question on SSI, you want to know if they'll pay the check directly to her.
18, she's qualified for SSI?
Yes.
And then do they pay directly to them or does it go to the parent?
The check is written to her, but you can set yourself up as a rep payee. So that's the way Courtney's is set up. I'm the rep payee. So and they give you specific language in how you set up the account. It's something like Courtney Linehan by Diane Linehan or reverse or whatever, but it has to be very specific, and there are limits as to how much money she can have at any given time, and at the end of the year you have to report back. But did that answer your question? Yeah, you have to go through you go through the intake process, the application process with Social Security, and then they'll ask you questions about her living situation. There's a maximum amount of money for somebody who may be living on their own. There's a different rate if your son or daughter is living in your home, and so they calculate all of that, and then they tell you the amount, and the check comes written to your child with the rep payee. The second,
can a parent be paid to take care of the child, like when they're an adult?
Yeah,
Can you be?
okay.
Might be too late.
Can a parent be paid to take care of an adult child? There are different rules for different buckets of money. I know through in Massachusetts, through our Mass Health, a parent, as long as they're not a guardian, can be paid as a personal care attendant. The money that comes from DDS has different restrictions on it. That one, a sibling can be paid, but a parent cannot be paid, and I think it's parents who cannot be paid. So, did that, different restrictions, different money.
Yeah, okay, in Oklahoma, for Alyssa, for me and Alyssa, Alyssa's check, she has a separate checking account, and her, 10 minutes, and her, 10 minutes, and her account is, and checking account is Alyssa Wilson and Wilson, and but it's my name and for the benefit of. And so the checks are directly deposited to that account, and then every month I keep record keeping and allot a certain amount of money for her living expenses and stuff like that, and that comes out and comes to me, and I pay her living expenses because she lives with us. The DDSD, we are still on the waiting list from hell, have been since she was 18, so she's 25 now. We are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. We haven't seen the tunnel yet, but we're seeing the light down there. We're about 2 years out from getting services. When she does get services in Oklahoma through DDSD, I actually can apply and be her HTS, or Rehabilitation Training Specialist, and get paid to take care of her. But it differs from state to state. Every state is different. There's different rules in different situations.
Here, go to this one.
We live in North Carolina, and in North Carolina, we have Medicaid. Medicaid provides CAP services for our son. He gets 54 hours through the week, and when school is out, he gets an additional 30 hours. And he also gets 800-something hours a year respite. My husband is allowed to work 40 hours a week to get paid for as part of his services. When he turned 18 and become an adult, a parent is allowed to do this. Even me as a guardian could do that, but they prefer it to be the non-guardian. So we're actually switching agencies who handle that for us, and they're making it where we are actually able to do every single bit of Zach's hours. And for us, that's good because it gives us more time with him. Of course, he needs time away from us, as any adult does. So he does have the respite, and we actually have picked our people who work with our agency. And we have had very good luck. Of course, we were on the waiting list until he was probably 13 or 14 years old. So we haven't had it long, but we've fought long and hard for what we do have. And his SSI check comes straight to me as a payee. He does not have to have his own account. It comes straight to me. I just have to do the payee representative report about once or twice a year. But the most important thing for that is saying he does not have any savings.
I do self-directed. I think Diane and I chatted about this 2 years ago. I do self-directed. I also work with a fiscal intermediary and hire my own staff for Emily, who is 27. One of the things I wanted to mention about hiring staff, because we all have kind of nightmare stories, especially when you have to go through an agency. I used to send people specifically to the agency and call them and say, that girl, when she comes in, she's mine, because I sent her to you. So, but that's one way that you can do it. Before I did self-directed. One option for hiring staff for self-directed is, and I don't work for these people, so I'm not plugging, is a website called care.com. It was actually started by a lady in Boston for her children, but they have a special needs section for special needs caregivers, and I've actually had good luck hiring through them. But just like any other ad, you obviously have to go with your gut and do your background check. I'm very fortunate. I live in a state where, as part of my self-directed opportunities, not even out of our pot of money, they will do the essential Rhode Island's version of Corey, background checks and et cetera for me, so I have that as well. But for those of you who don't have that ability, you can even pay through care.com to do background checks, et cetera. And they do references, et cetera. But I would urge people to hire, as someone else said, rather than on their education and their background, et cetera. There was a gentleman in Rhode Island who was very well known in disabilities advocacy, Paul Sherlock, and he and I had a conversation years and years ago about hiring staff, and he told me, he said, Sue, you're a nurse, you know how to hire people and train them. He said, but you can't change their personality. You can't make them kind or respectful. So when you're hiring people, think of that. You can teach people how to take care of your child, but you can't make them kind or respectful.
I just wanted to add a few things. First of all, to the international panel, I'm from Denmark, but have lived in Massachusetts for over 30 years. And you mentioned before, Diane, that you have to get close to the system, find out how the system works, and then close your eyes and use it. And being in this country without any family, we had to find a place for our son Daniel, who's now 36. Because being involved in organizations, I knew if we were going home one night, got killed in a car accident, I knew exactly where Daniel would end up. He would be put into a place where he might not fit in, where we would never want him to be. So in our case, it became extremely important to get him into a home, a group home, where we were involved, where we knew the housemates he had, and were involved in what the direction of the house was. So that is what we chose. And Daniel lives we lived in Lexington for 30 years. That's where he grew up. People know him. There are people who know him who don't know I'm his mom. So he's very well known. And he lives there in a group home with 3 others. It was important for us, since Daniel is nonverbal, that they were higher functioning, that they were verbal, because we need someone to report. If anything goes on in the house, Daniel couldn't report it. So he lives with 2 women, and there are 2 guys, and they're all higher functioning, they're verbal. 2 of them are Down syndrome, 1 of them very high functioning. And it's up and down because it depends on staff. And unfortunately, pay for staff is not good. But 4 families are all very involved. And we know if something happens to us tomorrow, the 3 other families will look after our kid, and vice versa. And I have to say, because we are so involved in the house, Daniel has a really good life. He has a social agenda he is more busy than we have ever been. He's doing something every single day when he comes home from his day program. He has a great day program that took a long time to find a good one. But this one involves horseback riding. He's out, he doesn't sit in the day program. They're out the door most of the day doing things. So it's a very good, exactly what he needed. But I just want to say you can find group homes which are good. This house is located in a beautiful part of Lexington. And I just wanted to add one thing. It's owned by Lexington, the house. It's a low-income house. And Lexington, because we were involved with the selectmen, etc., approached us and asked if we were interested in this house for our kids when it became available, when a family had to move out whose salary exceeded what the limit was. And we said yes. And Daniel lives with 2 of his housemates we've known since they were 8, participating in Special Olympics. So I would say get involved, know how the system is, and use it. You have to.
Just a couple of housekeeping things. One is if you can fill out your questionnaire and hand it to me on the way out, we'd appreciate it. And then a reminder to attend the Sweet 16 dance party. It's a complimentary dinner, and we're also going to have the In It to Win It drawing tonight. That's tonight at 7 o'clock, and there'll be a cash bar there.
I was actually going to do those announcements. Sue, would you like to say something?
They're not listed as monitors.
I just want to say that, you know, if people have childcare and all, you know, it ends at 5:30 or something like that, but for the parents in the United States who have children who have not gotten SSI, I hope you know about the Compassionate Allowance Program. If you don't, you should, because Phelan-McDermid syndrome is on the Compassionate Allowance Program, meaning that SSI is fast-tracked. So if you have a question, let me know, or the people who know about it, but I just want to mention that. So.
Thank you, Sue. We'll start to tie things up now. One thing I think that we need to think of, though, Ms. President, is that we have to get these ideas together in some kind of discussion format over time, and not just leave it here.
Absolutely, that's great. Who's going to
Somehow,
volunteer for
well, I don't know that yet. But somehow, like, we have to continue these things on. And we've been very good. I mean, we started off, at the very beginning, we didn't have any adults, except for Eric Aucklander, and he was it, and he was our elder statesman, and it was amazing. But now, all of our kids that started out, we're all adults now, and then we have all these other ones coming in, and it's becoming very, very involved. So somehow we have to figure out how to do that.
Rory, I just want to say, one of the things, it's small, but we're starting is the adult Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay, and just in summing up, I want to tell a story about the farmer. There was this farmer, and this farmer had an old donkey. And he had an old well that was dried up, and the donkey fell in the well. So he tried everything he could think of to get this donkey out of the well, and he could not get the donkey out of the well, so he just decided, well, the well is old and dried up, and the donkey is old and dried up, I'll just bury him in the well. So he called over all his neighbors, they brought their shovels, and they started shoveling the dirt into the poor donkey in the well, who cried piteously as the dirt fell on his back. And then all of a sudden, things became very quiet. And they kept shoveling, and the farmer went and looked in the hole and saw something miraculous happening. As each shovelful landed on the donkey's back, it shook it off, and it landed on the ground under it, and he took a step up. And eventually, all these people shoveling the dirt saw the donkey come out over the lip of the hole and happily wander off into the field. Now, the moral of the story is, life is going to shovel dirt on you, all kinds of dirt. The trick is getting out of the well, is to shake it off and take a step up. Each of our troubles is a stepping stone. We can get out of the deepest wells just by not stopping, never giving up. Shake it off and take a step up. And that draws us to a conclusion. Thank you, panelists. And we will see you all at the Sweet 16.